Hey, but nice to see you again. Round
Yeah,
two.
yeah, it's a pleasure. It was fun last time.
Yeah, it was. It was. It was nice to see you. So this one is for the Absum channel, which is sort of after school stuff. Sort of giving people an opportunity just to chat about the challenges, the highs, the successes, the interesting things. You know, you saw the one with Anton. It was incredibly interesting. Some of the stuff that he got up to. And I'm sure that St. John's is such a wide and varied and talented community that, I can't wait to talk to some guys from other years, other decades as well.
Mm.
But now, wanted to chat with you because it was a funny. So Harry, he was listening to the first one that we did with you,
Yeah,
and he said, I couldn't believe that it was fucking Nick. I had to go to the video to make sure that it was Nick because his accent was so different.
yeah, it's crazy. When I'm in the US, people tell me I'm South African, and when
Yeah.
I'm in South Africa, they tell me I'm American. You know?
I get the same. I get the same. So yeah, so I want to let you know that was he's down in Clarke, I think.
Yeah, I hope he enjoyed it. I haven't chatted to him in a long, long time. I really got to pick up the phone and call him, man.
He's a
He
good
was a good
okay.
friend.
So here's an idea. I did this for my 40th, I think, and
I remember that he had a big call, right?
yeah. So I was
Yeah,
thinking about maybe doing that once a quarter, just putting an invite, getting 5, 6, 7 guys together and having a call and recording it, and then you know,
yeah, yeah. Getting people who haven't spoken in
yeah,
20 years to pitch up on a Zoom and chat to each other.
yeah, for sure. So I remember this. Tell me if I'm wrong, because because we were mates
Mm.
at school. We were mates at university. We both went to Wits, and we had our other mates as well, and went off and did other things. But we saw each other fairly regularly. You lived close to me in Tannenberger Avenue, and then it's right, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And so I remember that the story I recall is you were working as a waiter somewhere.
I
And
think it was San Marco
yeah, and because you're a jammy bastard, this guy comes in. I don't know if he'd been in once or twice, but he was on business. You end up talking to him, chatting to him, telling him you're head boy and all that bullshit. Um, and he says, okay, if you can learn Mandarin, basic Mandarin in 6 weeks or 6 months or something, I'll get you a position in this company. Is it something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite. The company was an American company, and they were fairly large, and they had a lot of Asian operations. And actually, it was the
That was
Graham.
was that the W.R. Grace?
Yeah. Graham and Bruce Frank's dad worked for them, right? And I was like doing the Ironman at the time of training, and I got back from a ride, and they'd left a message in those days with my folks, on the landline, and said, "Hey, we have a guy from Hong Kong here, and Nick's interested in going to Asia. If he wants, you can come across and meet him for 30 minutes." So I, just cleaned up and went there. Had a chat to the guy. His name was Fred Holland, a super. Still speak to him once a year here. And he said, "Well, if you ever get to Hong Kong, give us a call." Right. And so, the kind of thing you'd shoot your kids for, right? Like I finished Ironman like in early May the next week. No job, no money, one suitcase. I stayed with a friend of my dad's in Hong Kong initially. I just pitched up in and went to this guy and said, "Hey, I'm here," because in those days there were no email or whatever, right? You faxed or you called the landline, and went through a bunch of interviews. I mean, I was 20, 23, 24, whatever it was, and they offered me a job. And actually, the job was to go as a business trainee to Shanghai, right? Which is a story in itself, right? And just help out the general manager there. And there were a couple of interesting things about that. Was number one, the U.S. company had a wholly owned Chinese American foreign company number that was the number one. Right. Who actually the mayor of Shanghai at the time was Jiang Zemin, who later became the president of China. And we had a photo of that in the lobby. Obviously, we didn't know he'd become president at the time. Number two, Deng Xiaoping was only just coming into power and opening up the whole country. So everyone wore Mao suits in Shanghai. Everyone rode bicycles, And then the third thing is my wife at the time was working for Cathay Pacific as an air hostess, right? And I remember she earned 16,000 Hong Kong dollars, which is about 1,500 US, and she got housing. And I agreed to go for 11,000 Hong Kong dollars, which was about 1,200, dollars a month. So it was crazy, man. I didn't know what I was doing. I just pitched up there and kind of figured it out day to day.
So you must have seen, because how long you were there? You were there.
I was there for about 15 months.
About 15 months. And have you been back on a regular basis, or have you been back infrequently since?
To SA?
No, Shanghai.
I mean, then I moved to Hong Kong, and then I moved to Manila, and then I'd go up like every 2 or 3 months, for business.
You must have seen some unbelievable change.
So, have you been to Shanghai?
No.
Okay, so the Fast and the Furious movies where they have all those, big buildings and so on.
Yeah.
Well, there are two parts of Shanghai split by the Yangtze River, right? Old-time Shanghai, the most famous is the Bund. It's, where the Europeans built these old structures that for some reason, at the time of Mao and whatever, they didn't pull down. And then across is Pudong. And we used to ride our bikes after a soccer game, the 20 or so foreigners that were in Shanghai. And we used to stop on sort of a bridge, looking from Shanghai to Pudong. And there was one telecommunications tower and cows. And now we watch the Fast and the Furious, right? And there are all these buildings, and I'm terrified of going back because I'm going to say, "What the f?" I'm really old because I remember when none of these were here.
So you were there when there actually were peasants.
Oh, absolutely.
Not now. J.D. Barnes with his bullshit.
Paul, right? The nappies on the babies, because there was no air conditioner, right? So everyone lived on the street. So you saw how the family lived. And the babies, right? The friggin' nappies were as a piece of cloth with a hole in the back. So if they did their thing, it just went on the street. I mean, that was friggin'.
Why not having a nappy then?
I don't know, man. I'm just telling you the way it was, all right?
Just let it swing, man. Let it swing.
Whatever. It was crazy. In those days in Shanghai, there was very little Western housing and so on. I mean, you had to pay like 5,000 US a month, for housing. So I was I was just living day by day and using common sense to figure it all out.
Were you walking around with a hole in the back of your pants?
Maybe at midnight on a Friday night, yeah.
What was the social life like with the presumably mostly Westerners?
I mean, those days the Chinese, didn't speak English, right? So yeah, and I didn't speak very good Mandarin.
But you worked on it. You worked on it hard, though, huh? I seem to recall.
Yeah, I just don't have a talent for languages, so it's kind of hard, right? But yeah, I mean, I could get around, right?
Yeah, I've noticed your English is terrible.
Yeah, but the answer to the question, it was like 20, maybe 25. Western, some of them Caucasian, some of them Asian dudes who, for some random reason, some of them were at school there, at university or so on, studying the language. Some of them, just a very few, were working for American companies, and we just became great friends. We met up. I was at the first McDonald's to open in Shanghai, the second in the whole of China. Make us feel old, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's bullshit.
I remember going to the first one in Cape Town.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, so it was a great experience. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for the world. But yeah, I didn't go as some big shot expat, I had to pay attention to what I was doing.
Yeah, but I think that being a big shot in anything, you're insulated from the experience.
For sure.
And I think that the time you had there, so I've got another mate here, a British guy, he was an engineer in Russia in like 1990 to 1996. So that post
Yeah.
Berlin Wall fall time period. He said it was just a cowboy show, you
Yeah.
know. And I imagine the time you were there at China, the Chinese were starting to realize, well, fuck me, this is potential here. Is this what you guys have been doing? Because we can do this just as well.
I mean, it was even probably before then, Paul, right? I don't think the penny had dropped yet. And I'll give you an example, right? Like, so my boss was the Hong Kong Chinese. He was the general manager of China, right? And only he had a car. So there was one car in the company car was him. And the politicians had cars, right? So you had to be an incredibly senior businessman, right? And so what happened is that he didn't drive, he had a chauffeur, and the chauffeur was always with the head honcho, right? And so the second most important person in the whole company, and very often in the government, was the chauffeur, right? So I can't remember his name, but I would say to the Chinese guys, hey, I got a problem, I need to speak to Tony, who's the general manager. What do you suggest? You talk to him.
Yeah.
Why am I going to talk to the chauffeur, right? I mean, in our
Well,
minds.
I guess it's like, you go speak to the concierge in the big hotels.
Yeah, or in the mafia, whatever they
You
call
get,
that dude, right? You don't go to the main dude, and that's how it was, So these chauffeurs in politics and so on, they were key men. They had immense power, right? Those jobs were hugely coveted. They always, when we went to dinner at a round Chinese table, with the food going round and round, the right person to the right hand was not the next highest, most senior guy in the company. It was the chauffeur.
wow.
As you say, you live the moments, and it's irreplicable, like, if that's a word, right? It almost sounds like you're not telling the truth, right? Or otherworldly, or whatever it is. Yeah.
And what was your company doing there at that time? What was their aim? What was their goal?
I mean, it was really, as I said, the first company you're coming into the US, and what had happened, they made a niche product, which was a bottle of Coke. If you opened the top up, that little plastic, they made that, and they made the can sealants, right? And we were spec'd 100% to Coca-Cola, Anheuser-Busch, blah, blah, blah. And that's the only reason why they allowed us to be wholly owned, because it was a technology issue. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Similar to Tesla. Tesla is also wholly owned now in China, right? Basically, it was beginning of these global supply chains, and we were spec'd around the world. China wanted Coke, they wanted Anheuser-Busch, whatever it was. And so we came as this minute little gnat on the back of the arse of this huge animal.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
So you were there for about 15 months. When did you meet your wife?
Oh, that was a couple of years later.
Was that in Manila?
Yeah, she was living in Hong Kong. Cathay Pacific Air hostess, right? I was living in Manila at that time. So I think, I went to Manila in like 1995, and then 1995, 96 or whatever. And then it's
96.
yeah. And so, yeah. I'm not sure. She says I met her immediately, and my memory is I didn't. But anyway, that's whatever. So Manila is a fun place, and so basically what I did is I'd done a half decent job in Shanghai, and they said, well, come and do it in Southeast Asia. So it was super cool, because I would literally travel every week, every second week, and the business was from Seoul, in the north, to Australia, in the south, and I would travel during the week. I'd stay over on the weekend, fly back, and partying in every city.
Yeah, and I suppose you were probably hosted as well in every city.
What's that?
You were probably entertained and hosted in every city as well.
Yeah, at least during the week. But in those days, we would just, maybe if you had a friend there, or a friend came with you, you'd go into all these sort of nightclubs or whatever. Yeah, what a time, man! That was so fun. We've all had those times, right?
I was in Bible study. So you did that. You were with the W.R. Grace from 94 to for about 10 years, yeah?
Yeah, then my boss in Asia, an English guy, he became the president of that division globally out of Boston, right? And he asked me to come with him to Boston, and we were very close. And I was in my late 20s, he was in his maybe late 30s, and he's a super good guy. Just taught me a ton.
So you were like the Luca Brasi.
What's the characterization there? Sorry, I'm not sure. Which movie is that? The Sopranos or something like that?
It's Godfather. The Godfather. He was the guy who got sent to go and deal with the shit.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, yeah, exactly. Yeah, but the one thing about Richard, he's died now, and unfortunately, is he was a flagrant womanizer, right? Oh my God, he just messed with anything that moved. And the funny anecdote is that we had our annual meeting in Bali, right? And I decided to invite my wife, Geraldine, right, to come down for the first time, meet the guys, and so on and so forth. Right? And this Richard was married, right? And we were in whatever nice hotel in Bali, and it's like 5 p.m. on a Sunday. You've been there, right? Your cocktails start the week or whatever. And he just pitches in with this absolutely gorgeous Thai babe, 20 years younger than him. Like we are. Holy shit, dude, man, you're married, right? And you're coming in. And he walked around, he loved it, he was laughing as if there was no issue at all. And like Geraldine was saying to me, what the hell is this?
Yeah, my views on things have changed so much over the years. I can remember a time where I'd be like, that's for the last 15, 20 years probably I'd be like, nah, dude, not
Yeah,
cool. Not
no.
cool. Yeah, you don't do that. You don't do that to your wife. But I am not here to be sanctimonious because I lived my life and I was a dose for many of those years.
Yeah, we always say that to some extent, right?
Yeah, but did you meet any old boys during your travel? Just like out of the blue, just went into a meeting, went into a social event. Was there any crossover at all?
I mean, there wasn't a lot. I remember Bruce Frank when I was in Boston. He came. I remember that fondly, and there are probably a couple of others that I can't recall. But yeah, again, things change so much, right? In 2000, it wasn't like maybe we all had the financial ability or whatever it may be to spend a ton of time flying across and visiting buddies in Boston and so on. You know what I mean? So there weren't many, to be honest. I can't recall.
But it was the time, so I sort of reflect on us in South Africa. We were probably the second to last generation, sort of 5-year period generation of people who became the diaspora from South Africa. And whereas up until that point, the thought process of people 5 years older than us was that they would stay in South Africa just like their parents did. They move around South Africa. A few people would go to Oxford or Cambridge or America or whatever, but the vast majority. Whereas now you look at it, and there's still about 45, 50 of our year are in South Africa out of 90. But I imagine that number goes down with each year.
Yeah.
And, the South African diaspora, I mean, from my travels, I mean, everywhere I go, I bump into South African. A very good, a good guy that I met. I was in Traverse City, Michigan, for a number of years. It's a small town. It's gotten bigger now over the last 10 years, but it's a small town in North Lower Michigan, so Michigan split.
Mm.
It's in the middle of nowhere, and I bumped into. Well, I got told someone was coming from South Africa. It turned out he was a guy from Saints, and we had our I don't know what it's like today, but our great hatred rivalry, was Saints. We didn't talk to them and at a party. We didn't mingle, And he was 2 or 3 years younger than me. He passed away sadly, committed suicide. But he lived on the East Coast. He was the nicest guy. Like genuinely, he's one of those guys. I'm not one of those guys. He's one of those guys that could say something horrible, but it sounds nice. I say something nice and it sounds horrible. I was in this podunk town in Michigan, and I met this And then I was playing in the local, and this is about you, so I don't want to talk about myself, but I was playing rugby for, they had a local just rugby club there.
Nice.
And at one point of one of the years that I was there, the entire back line was South African.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of sad, isn't it, Paul?
It is sad.
Yeah.
Genuinely it's sad. Because
Yeah.
imagine how strong South Africa could be if that million of us, because the million that have left, the vast majority are intelligent, hardworking, successful. It's not to say that South Africans in South Africa aren't, but the ones that have left had the ability to leave, which meant that they had the education qualifications or the financial ability to leave. And it's heartbreaking that those million South Africans who could have done so much for South Africa felt the need to leave.
Yeah, no, I said to Americans, I mean, yeah, you have no idea, right? If you're South African, Venezuelan, maybe one or two others, right? Your country's all over the world, your family's all over the world, right? And it's a privilege to live here, and have whatever's required to make a country, maintain its people,
Yeah,
so
Trump's doing a good job of that.
What's that?
I know we differ on this one, but that's fine. So I've always thought, that, because it sounds like you were sort of business development, relationship building, and that was kind of your brief. Is that right, or were you more technical?
No, I don't think I was that. I was just like, I kind of had a role where you basically just took stuff that was slightly messy and systematized it. You know what I mean? That was I didn't do anything really fancy, actually.
Was that the sales, or was it production, or?
Yeah, mainly, manufacturing, supply chain, that sort of stuff, right? Just go into a messy situation, have the attention to detail, the discipline to figure things out, and so that was mainly the role I did, right? And actually really enjoyed it, and I still do it today, actually.
Where was your main learning point? Was it that first 2-3 years where you were in Hong Kong and Shanghai?
I mean, it was definitely with that slightly corrupted Richard I just talked to you about, right? Yeah, and I say this to my sort of kids, right? For whatever reason, he either taught me or, we'd learned it at school. I always had a slightly contrarian way of looking at problems, right? And for whatever reason, I think that's been my little bit, for what it's worth, right? In business, right? I always try to look at a problem and was skeptical or cynical or curious as to how it could be done better, and sort of that's what I've done. Whether I've worked for, I worked for, that was W.R. Grace, then I worked for Chevron for sort of 15, 16, 17 years. Then I worked for myself for a couple of years, and now I work for BCG, and it's the same kind of concept. Like, this is effed up, right? I'm not spending my short life trying to make it marginally better. Let's try and be bold and figure out a better solution, right? And don't get me wrong, I didn't go to crazy high ranks in corporations. My philosophy was actually always, I was always very concerned about incremental return, effort and return. And I wanted to spend as much time with the family and keeping myself sort of fit and so on. And so I was very cognizant of incremental effort and how much I got for that incremental effort, right? So my philosophy was always to be as wealthy as I could be with the amount of effort I was prepared to put in, if that makes sense.
No, I get that.
And what was funny, a neighbor about 10 years ago drove past me, a lady, and I'd come back from a run at sort of 9:30 Monday morning, and she said to me, for the amount that you work, you're the wealthiest guy I know. And I said to her, well, to be honest, that's just the greatest compliment of my career. You know what I mean? That's exactly what I've tried to accomplish. But yeah, you left a lot on the table as a consequence, right? And politically, this was my key learning, right? At a certain level in any corporation, right, the people above you have to trust that you have their back, that you have their principles, that you're drinking the Kool-Aid, right? And because I was slightly contrarian in terms of my approach to work, and also everyone knew that I wasn't fully in it, right? It became a glass ceiling, right? I could only go so high, and I was not going to go higher because the guys above didn't trust me. I don't think we've got the time, but I could give you a couple of examples where that happened.
Perfect.
And I wasn't going to play the games. Like, I'm sure you feel the same way, Paul. Like, your greatest strength becomes your greatest weakness. You get all the benefits of the strengths, and you realize you have the weaknesses, and you pay for it, and you're happy with the
Yeah,
trade.
100%. I am not a great employee.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, because I genuinely, completely misguidedly, but genuinely think that I'm usually smarter and better than the person above me. But that's been since school.
Yeah.
So, but I think that, we have to also be sort of self-aware enough to know that women have had to deal with this glass ceiling thing forever.
Yeah.
And I remember having a moment. I'll tell you the moment I had where I really, really, it was a seminal moment in my life. I was to therapy, which I know that you haven't, because you haven't needed to. But I was in therapy about 12 years ago, and I've always been, the toxic, and also in a good way, masculine man.
Mm.
Always wanting to do the right thing and be strong and everything else. But when I was a younger man, I wasn't great. But I was regaling this. Not regaling sounds like I was boasting about. I wasn't. I was just telling my therapist about this. And I'd been in South Africa. My therapist was in the UK, and I'd been in South Africa previously. I won't mention any names, but I was talking to some guys in South Africa. And I respected these guys, and I liked these guys. I wanted these guys to say my friends.
Mm.
I was still 40 years old, or whatever the case may be. And I remember saying something about the fact that I was going through this sort of therapy journey, and that I didn't think I'd been. And this guy said to me, who, a South African guy, he said, "Well, those people that you might have sort of hurt emotionally or whatever, they probably benefited from it, made them stronger."
Yeah.
And I was like, I'd got to the point where I knew that was bullshit. That what I'd done was wrong, and I shouldn't have said or done whatever it was that I'd done in that moment. But I didn't call the guy out because I didn't want to lose that friendship, or that. And so I sort of self-censored myself, which is not
Yeah.
something which has happened very often in my life. And my therapist said to me, "So how'd that feel?" And I said, "It was fucking awful. It was one of the few times in my life where I have self-censored myself, where I haven't robustly defended my position." And she said, "That's how women feel every day."
Yeah.
And I did not. I don't think I spoke for about 5 minutes, because it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I'm not comparing it to your situation, but because we've spoken, over the last few months, and you've told me about these sort of situations that you've had. But isn't it remarkable how we left school with such certainty and conviction of who we were and what the world was, and yet we've developed over time, we've changed over time, and you've constructed this personal mantra that has served you well. It's curtailed you in a way, but it's served you very well, as your neighbor reflected.
Yeah.
And I think I commend you for that, because it's as we've seen with lots of other people that we know, the dollar, the pound, the euro is a very enticing thing, and it can overcome family and relationships, and all those other potentially ancillary things. Whereas you have kept it you kept the balance.
Yeah. No, it was very conscious, to be honest. And there's a lot in what you just mentioned. But, yeah, maybe it would take 2 hours to, analyze that, what you said, right? But, yeah, it was very conscious. So let me give you an example. So these couple of things I referred to, where the people didn't trust me, more senior than me, There were 3 or 4 of them between, I'd say, 2010 when I moved to Houston, and before, and when I left in about 2017 or whatever. And then in 2012, I went to my wife, or 2011, and I said, I'm done. And she said, what are you done? I said, I'm giving up on my career. I'm going to coast, and eventually I'm going to get retrenched or fired or whatever. I'm done, right? And
Is that
so
when she divorced you?
many other reasons she could have done that. It was a long list. But, I had manufacturing facilities. And I used to go to them in the US, and maybe 7 or 8 days in total a month. The headquarters was here in Houston, and I said, "If you guys, I'm never going down there," right? And I knew there'd be consequences. So there's this. The elementary school is like a mile down the road here, right? And for the 7 years my kids were at elementary school, I rode with them. Apart from the 7 or 8 days I was traveling at my facilities every month. And I used to block out 8 to 8:30 in my calendar and 3 to 3:30 to pick them up and go home. And then I did the same when they took the bus, because we have to walk across the golf course here to the bus stop.
That
Like,
sounds tough, man. That sounds tough, man. Walking across the golf course,
exactly. But
mate.
the point is,
Mate,
the
my violin.
No, that's the whole point. You're laughing at the point I'm trying to make, and I know you're just jesting. I was omnipresent in their life, and eventually, I got retrenched because of that, right? It sure as hell wasn't because of performance
Was this
issues.
Chevron?
Yeah, Chevron, right?
But
And then
yeah, you told me that you had some issues with the entire culture around Chevron.
yeah. But the point is, in credit to myself, because there's an argument that could have been that if I'd stayed there, life would have been easier for the years afterwards, right? But I credit to myself. I made the decision. I was done. I reallocated, a big share of my life to the family, and I'd be at swim practice with the kids, and so on. And I basically took my work day down to 6 hours or whatever it is. And, then wasn't upset when, they got rid of me, 7 or 8 years later, whatever it was, right? And I would, if you gave me $100 million and you put it on the table and you said, you've got to give up, riding to school and so on with the kids, right? I wouldn't do it. Absolutely not. It was absolutely the right decision. Yeah.
100%. And I applaud you for that. Let me talk to you about talk to me. When were you married the first time?
Well, I've only been married once.
Oh, really? Okay,
2000.
sorry.
Yeah, 2000. Yeah, why do you think I was married?
The Cathay Pacific.
Yeah, she's my wife now. Yeah.
Oh, still? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's from the Philippines. Yeah, but she's...
okay.
Yeah.
I'm probably just looking at all of the other St. John's guys who've had multiple, like myself, who've had multiple. So, I'm throwing you in with the same.
One wife is just tough enough, dude, man.
I love how you whisper that. And I've got her on camera. Drink your water, mate. I've got my whiskey. But we are 6 hours different, so, that's fine.
Exactly.
Okay, so you've just been married the once. You've got 3 children.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike you, they seem to have some sporting talent.
Yeah, at least the 2 boys. Yeah. They, very good swimmers. I don't know why. The difference between the US, and you may know from your time, right, and your kids here, and South Africa is we played 4 or 5 sports, right?
Yeah.
And I was kind of average at all of them. We're here very, very early. I mean, 6, 7, 8 years old, you were starting to specialize. So we always try to keep them in a recreational sport, right? Soccer, to teach them teamwork, ball skills, and all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah, but they've been, the 2 boys have been, and the girl, she did it for a long time too. Just, they've done 70,000 meters a week easily for the last 15, 16, 17 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's commitment on their part, but it's also commitment on you and your wife's part.
Yeah. But at some point in time, they loved it, right? Like the girl wanted to give up at about 13, 14, and she gave up, right? But the boys, yeah, they seem to love it. They like the routine. They like the discipline. So swimming's been great for us.
And they've been successful as well, haven't they?
Yeah, one was at the University of Texas, which is the #1 swim team in the country, if not the world. Leon Marchand, as an example, trains there, right? The French Olympic, gold medalists. And the other one's at Michigan. Well, University of Michigan. That's not shabby, right? To swim there. Yeah, so they've done well, and actually it was used more to get them into good universities, right? Like the younger boy, he's at Ross Business School, which is, I think, the #2 business school, including Ivy Leagues in the country. But the only reason he got into Michigan, it's impossible to get into Michigan, right, from outside of state, right? Is because of the swimming, So that was the avenue. It was never about swimming. My son once said to me, my oldest son, he was thinking about going pro. I said, well, what do you mean? How much do you earn in swimming if you're going pro? He said $20,000 a year. I said, well, that's not going pro. That's going indigent. This the hell, Yeah.
Now, one of your sort of passions is one of your children has type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, the one in Michigan, yeah.
Yeah, and which is remarkable that he's
crazy.
That he's successful as he is.
Yeah.
With his swimming career, with having to deal with type 1 diabetes. And I know that you've been involved with the type 1 diabetes sort of community, and talk about that.
Yeah, well, firstly, for the 3 or 4 folks who may watch this, right, if they know anyone who needs any assistance with type 1 diabetes, I truly believe I have a PhD in it, right? I'm extremely emotional about the topic, right? Because you have these young kids, if you know it, but just to be clear, right? One day in your life, you go from being normal and eating chocolate and whatever you want and so on, and maybe hating the once a year or once every 2 years, you've got to go to the doctor and have an injection, to, suddenly you're having injections, long-acting insulin in the morning, long-acting insulin in the evening, and then every time you eat, having injections. So you have 6, 7, 8 or more injections every day of your life. I've given my son, and by the way, it's even worse if you're an athlete, never mind an elite athlete, because adrenaline is nothing more than blood, sugar going into your blood, right? So you have to have a lot more insulin when you're competing, right? So I've given my kid, if I've 30, 40,000 injections, can you believe that number? And, the moments.
I can't believe you can count that high.
Yeah, well, you just take 8 times a day, right? Across 15 years or whatever it is, it's just, whatever it is, it's a crazy number, and see the resilience in the kids and the determination. Yeah, it's totally inspiring, man. And obviously the downside of too much insulin is you can go into a coma and pass out, right? And so, yeah, it's crazy. On important meats, that you have to use a different insulin that only peaks at 6 hours, just for another data point. So when we were like junior nationals and so on and so forth, or state at the high school, I would wake up at 2 a.m., right? He'd be fast asleep and give him his first insulin dose,
Wow.
Now he's on a pump and glucose monitor and so on. Yeah, but he's a tough son of a bitch. Yeah, he's the real McCoy. I can assure you, a tough boy, very quiet, never complains, but a tough son of a bitch.
Wow, kudos, eh? I don't know if he's got type 1, but John Mack's got diabetes.
Yeah, John Mack?
Yeah.
Yeah, now John Mack's got type 2, right? So, yeah, at that, unless he was diagnosed in his...
I don't know. I just know that he...
Type 1, you generally get it. That's why it's sometimes called juvenile diabetes, right?
Yeah.
You get it generally in your late teens is the latest, and then you get type 2, and you get that for whatever reasons. Yeah, it's a freaking tough disease. It's no bullshit, dude.
No, it's not.
Crazy.
Well, it killed 100% of people who had it 100 years ago.
Insulin, honest to God, if it's not the greatest, one of the greatest inventions in the world, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then you have these F-wits in the bloody government here in the US, right? And it's insulin is 50, 60 years old. And if you want to be on a continuous glucose monitor and a pump and insulin, and you don't have insurance, you're spending 25 grand a year, right?
Yeah, it's bullshit.
For a drug that's 60 or 70 or whatever years old. It's fucking amazing.
Cost 50p to make a slug.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
So you've lived Shanghai, Hong Kong, Manila. You're in Houston, Boston. You also did a little sojourn in Cape Town.
Yeah. In actual fact, between 94 and 2010, I've been here since 2010 just to get my kids through school and so on. I went, so 16 years, right? These are the places I spent more than a year. Hong Kong, Shanghai, Manila, Bangkok, Boston, San Francisco, Miami, San Francisco, Cape Town, Houston. Yeah, in that period of time. It was crazy, yeah.
What was Cape Town? That was Chevron. What was that like?
I mean, I was like manufacturing and supply chain on the downstream side for Europe, Africa, and Middle East. So it was a super cool job. And obviously as a city, especially in 2008 to 2010, I mean, oh my God. I think I've almost been or have been 100 countries now, Paul, and just Cape Town is order of magnitude.
Yeah, right? It is.
If it didn't have the problems, you can think of, sorry, someone's just trying to call me. Rio and Sydney and wherever, right? Cape Town comes out tops every single time.
100%.
Yeah.
I hadn't been there for about 15 years, and I've been a couple of times, three times in the last sort of 4 years. And the first time I went back there was probably just after COVID, driving from the airport, and it's Africa, so you got to deal with the complexity and the inequity. But driving along that is the N1 from the airport, and it was a beautiful blue sky day. Mountain was there, and I was just like, this is the most unbelievably beautiful thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I almost stayed there. Thank goodness I didn't, and started to work for myself when I had to come back in 2010. And I was really, in two minds, and my heart was pulling me. And I remember we lived in Constantia, right, between Klein and Constantia, and we were out there on the patio. Yeah, a couple of weeks before and we left, and I remember saying to my wife, the classic. Was it Jack Nicholson or whatever that movie? What happens if this was as good as it gets, right? And I knew that was the truth.
Yeah.
And B, I then went to Houston, and I can remember driving down jet lagged, after coming into Houston, and all it is. You've been to Houston?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, concrete and air conditioners, and I was like, this is fucking terrible.
Yeah. I worked in Dallas for a while. And I wasn't there for very long because I was traveling. I was driving all over the place. But I was in Dallas for a bit, and I was in Houston for a little bit. And have you seen the show that's on Paramount, Landsman?
I think I've heard of it, yeah, but I know what you're going to say. I mean, it's just like...
Yeah, it's... I remember...
Yeah.
I had to go and do a job in Midland. So I live in the Midlands now, and then there's Midland in Michigan, and then there's a Midland in Texas. And I remember going to the Midland in Texas, and you drive along this highway, scrubland on either road, straight road, just like an African road. And all of a sudden, you can see sort of a handful of 30-story buildings, and it goes from scrubland to city. And then 5 minutes later, you're back in scrubland again. And
it's not pretty. It's
not pretty at all. Yeah, but yeah, I was in Houston for a couple of months. Yeah, Dallas for about a year.
It's good family values, right? Great schools. Some of the neighborhoods, are nice, right? I mean, I love the people here, right? We've talked about this. Maybe we have a difference of opinion, right? I think
we differ politically, but we both like. We like good people.
The guns and Bibles, sort of perception of Texas. Just to be clear, I don't own a gun, and I'm religious, but I don't go to church, right? So I'm not like I'm one of the cliche, right? But those people are very decent people. I've got to be honest, man. Very decent people. Remind me a lot about South Africans. But hey, pal, I need to, as I said, right, I need to jump for an hour here because I've got the last work call of the day. Happy to carry on if you wish next week or something like that.
Well, you know what? That's we could genuinely do this for like 3 hours, and it wouldn't feel like.
I mean, if no one sees it, I'm having fun. So it's
exactly. All right. So, just in case this is the end of the video that I post, there was other stuff that I wanted to chat about, but Nick, thanks for your time. I know you've got to jump on another call. I appreciate it. Hopefully, one of these days we have a beer together. And thanks very much for doing this.
Yeah. Happy to do something else just for you and I carry on. But Paul, you're really good at this, so keep it up. And even if no one watches, to you and I, it's meaningful, right?
And for our kids, your kids are going to watch this as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks,
all right,
Bruce.
pal. Let me hop off. I'll hook up with you.